Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tuhami and these are the headlines. Indian troops have martyred 4 more civilians, including a woman in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, raising the toll to 6 in the past 24 hours. The troops targeted the youths and the 45-year-old woman during a coordinated search operation in Srinagar's Batamalu area. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout for the past 410 days. Pakistan has reaffirmed its stand on Palestine's two-state solution in line with the UN resolutions. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Palestinians' right to self-determination is undeniable. He called for the renewal of a sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. West African leaders have given Mali's military a 1-week ultimatum to appoint a civilian leader for the country. In a meeting with the army in Ghana, they demanded the appointment without any further delay or negotiations. The West African bloc has said it will lift sanctions only once civilian leaders were in place. India has recorded the world's biggest single-day COVID-19 spike of nearly 98,000 cases, taking the tally to over 5.1 million. The US has reported 1,147 deaths in a day, bringing the toll to more than 196,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the coronavirus has claimed 6,399 lives, with 6 new in the past 24 hours, while the total infections have crossed 303,000. The global death toll of the COVID-19 pandemic has topped 939,000, while the number of infections is nearing 30 million. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We start our news bulletin from Indian-occupied Kashmir, where Indian troops have martyred 4 more civilians, including a woman, raising the death toll to 6 in the past 24 hours. The troops targeted the youths and the 45-year-old woman during a cordon and search operation in Srinagar's Batamalu area. Earlier, Pakistan strongly condemned extrajudicial killing of a Kashmiri shopkeeper from Sopore region of occupied Kashmir. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the Indian forces picked up the 23-year-old Irfan Ahmed from his home and tortured him to death. Over 300 innocent Kashmiris have been martyred by the Indian occupation forces in fake encounters. Pakistan has reaffirmed its stand on Palestine's two-state solution in line with the UN resolutions. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Palestinians' right to self-determination is undeniable. Qureshi called for the renewal of a sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital based on internationally agreed parameters. The UN Secretary-General has urged Palestine and Israel to start negotiations following normalization deals with Bahrain and the UAE. At a news conference, Antonio Gutteres said the UN has been pushing hard to promote direct contact between Israel and Palestine. Gutteres said international cooperation is an absolutely essential aspect to solve problems. He said the Israeli annexation has been suspended and it is the moment the two sides find a political solution in line with the Security Council resolutions. Earlier, Israeli occupation forces detained 13 Palestinians during wide-scale raids and search operations in several areas in the occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, dozens of Jewish settlers have desecrated the Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem. Palestine's Islamic Awqaf Department says at least 126 settlers, escorted by Israeli police, forced their way into the mosque. An Israeli rights group says nearly 3,500 Palestinians have been killed during Benjamin Netanyahu's era as prime minister. According to their report, 799 children and 342 women were among the Palestinians who lost their lives in the Israeli attacks. It said thousands of others were wounded in the attacks by the Israeli forces. It said 167 Palestinians were killed in 2012, while more than 2,000 were killed in 2 years later in an operation dubbed Protective Edge. The year 2014 was one of the bloodiest years in Palestinian history due to the attacks Israel launched on Gaza. Beijing has lodged a formal complaint with Washington over an upcoming visit of the U.S. Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, Keith Krach, to Taiwan. In a statement, China's foreign ministry said the U.S. official's visit encourages the arrogant attitude of Taiwan's separatist forces. Earlier, Washington earmarked Krach to attend the funeral of former Taiwanese President Lee Teng-hui, known as the island's father of democracy. The U.S. remains Taiwan's main arms supplier, even though the two do not have any diplomatic ties. Beijing deems Washington's recent advances towards Taiwan a violation of the One China policy that U.S. pledged to respect in 1979. The U.S. says it is planning to expand its Navy to confront the growing maritime challenges from China. In a speech, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said the game-changing Future Forward program will expand the fleet to over 355 ships. Esper said the plan will add tens of billions of dollars to the U.S. Navy budget by 2045 to maintain superiority over Chinese forces. He said the future fleet will have increased lethality, survivability, capability and capacity to conduct distributed warfare. The Defense Secretary said Indo-Pacific region is the priority theater for the U.S. military. Esper said China has built a larger fleet, but it still cannot match the power of the U.S. Navy. Earlier, a Pentagon report claimed the Chinese Navy is the largest in the world with 350 ships, while the U.S. has 293. West African leaders have given Mali's military a one-week ultimatum to appoint a civilian leader for the country. In a meeting with the army in Ghana, the West African bloc demanded the appointment without any further delay or negotiations. The bloc said it would lift sanctions only once civilian leaders were in place. A transitional charter approved earlier says the interim president can be a soldier or a civilian and will be chosen by electors selected by the junta. Mali's neighbors and international powers fear the prolonged political turmoil will further destabilize the country. Libya's Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj has announced to step down by the end of October. In a televised speech, Sarraj said the dialogue committee will complete its work and choose a new presidential council and prime minister. Citing the UN-sponsored talks in Geneva, Sarraj said the progress made to unify Libya and prepare for elections is encouraging. Meanwhile, the Turkish foreign minister says Ankara and Moscow have moved closer to an agreement on a ceasefire and political process in Libya. Turkey backs Libya's internationally recognized Government of National Accord, while Russia supports the eastern-based Libyan National Army of Khalifa Haftar. Earlier this month, Libya's rival factions also agreed to hold elections within 18 months to appoint a new government. Cyprus says it is ready to engage in talks with Turkey to resolve differences, but only without blackmail and threats. President Nikos made these remarks after talks with the European Council President Charles Michel in Nicosia. He said Turkey's move to extend drilling operations came at a time when the EU was taking initiatives to reduce tensions. Meanwhile, Turkish Deputy Foreign Minister says the operations in the Mediterranean are in response to unilateral actions by Greek Cypriots and Greece. The official said this is not intimidation, but a show Turkey will continue to defend its own rights. On Tuesday, Turkey said it had extended the drilling vessel's operations in disputed waters of Cyprus until 12th of October. Turkey's police forces have arrested 16 suspects allegedly linked to the ISIS in the capital city of Ankara. State news agency said anti-terror police with the National Intelligence Service arrested 16 out of 19 wanted Iraqi nationals. It said the police are still searching for the remaining suspects. ISIS has carried out at least 10 suicide bombings, even bomb attacks and 4 armed attacks, killing 315 people and injuring hundreds more in Turkey. In response, Turkey launched anti-terror operations at home and abroad to prevent further attacks. Belarus has charged opposition protest leader Maria Kolesnikova with incitement to undermine national security. In a statement, the investigative committee said Kolesnikova provoked people through social media posts. In a statement, Kolesnikova said she will be taken out alive or in bits if she does not voluntarily leave Belarus. Kolesnikova is currently in jail in Minsk after ripping up her own passport last week to thwart an attempt to expel her to Ukraine. Kolesnikova played an important role in weeks of mass demonstrations by protesters who accused President Alexander Lukashenko of rigging his re-election. Lukashenko has denied all the allegations against him. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has accused the European Union of not negotiating a post-Brexit deal in good faith. Johnson's government has reached a deal to avert a rebellion in his own party over internal market bill, which the EU has asked the UK to scrap. The bill is aimed at ensuring Britain's 4 constituent nations can trade freely with each other after fully leaving the European Union. The Prime Minister said the bill was essential to counter absurd threats from Brussels, including a food blockade. Johnson said the EU wants London to put up trade barriers between Britain and its province of Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab has accused the EU of threatening the Good Friday Agreement by politicizing the Brexit deal. Greek police have started moving hundreds of migrants stranded on the island of Lesbos in new temporary tent camps. This comes more than a week after a fire in the Moria facility left 12,000 people without shelter. The new temporary camp at Kara Tepe is ready to take in at least 5,000 people, but officials say some migrants are reluctant to move to the new camp as they hope to leave the island. The government says authorities will continue to convince the migrants to enter the new camp. Earlier, Germany said it is ready to take 1,500 migrants. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. India has recorded the world's biggest single-day COVID-19 spike of nearly 98,000 cases, taking the tally to over 5.1 million. The US has reported 1,147 deaths in a day, bringing the toll to more than 196,000. The global death toll of the COVID-19 pandemic has topped 939,000, while the number of infections is nearing 30 million. More in this report.
As the world desperately pushes for an early release of a COVID-19 vaccine, the virus continues to rip through populations in India, parts of Latin America and the US, with over 1,000 dying in each country every day. Head of US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Robert Redfield, says a safe vaccine was unlikely before mid of next year. But US President Donald Trump contradicted him, saying a vaccine can be announced as soon as October.
Manufactured all of the necessary supplies so that as soon as the FDA approves the vaccine, and as you know, we're very close to that, we'll be able to distribute at least 100 million vaccine doses by the end of 2020, and a large number much sooner than that.
Africa's hotspot, South Africa's new estimate has found that instead of 600,000, about 12 million people in the country are probably infected. Ukraine and Indonesia are also reporting rising number of infections in their countries. World Health Organization says the disease is making an alarming comeback.
What is really worrying, I think, for us is that we're not only seeing an increase in the case numbers, but we're seeing an increase in the hospitalizations, we're seeing increases in ICU, and this is a number of countries that we're seeing this in across the Northern Hemisphere. particularly in certain parts of Europe, in Spain and in France, in the eastern part of Europe, in Georgia, Montenegro, Ukraine, in some states in the United States.
Mainland China has reported 9 new COVID-19 infections, down from 12 recorded yesterday. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported an uptick in daily infections due to sporadic clusters outbreak and untraceable cases, as 153 tested positive overnight.
In Pakistan, 6 more people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has reached 6,399. The ministry said 545 people tested positive for the virus overnight. It said there are 6,066 active infections, while the total confirmed cases have crossed 303,000 mark. The ministry said over 291,000 people have recovered so far. The Taliban said Germany has assured its support and assistance for peace in Afghanistan. In a tweet, spokesperson Dr. Mohammed Naeem said a Taliban delegation headed by Mullah Abdul Haq Wasik met with German envoy Marcus Putzer in Doha. Naeem said both sides discussed the ongoing Afghan peace process. Earlier, Taliban's political affairs director Mullah Baradar Khund held a virtual meeting with Norway's foreign minister Anne-Marie Aksen. The Taliban spokesperson said Aksen and Baradar discussed the importance of intra-Afghan talks and humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. The U.S. military has handed over 4 new A-29 Super Tucano planes to boost Afghan defense forces in Kabul. In addition to these new aircrafts, the U.S. has already given 18 of the same planes to the Afghan forces since 2016. During a ceremony, Afghan Defense Minister Asadullah Khalid said the forces would be ready to defend the country if the NATO troops leave. U.S. Special Forces Command General John Didrick said that NATO remains committed to assisting Afghanistan with training and funding. He said the Afghan security forces have become professional and better equipped as they fight terrorism. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Pakistan takes big tread forward in the climate change era by achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goal a decade ahead of the 2030 deadline. In its annual report, the United Nations Development Programme has lauded Pakistan's achievement. Put in this report by our correspondent Sumaira Khan.
Despite being listed amongst the vulnerable nations to global warming, Pakistan finally turned its green ambitions into a reality and earned global recognition. The country met the UN goal for protecting the environment and holding off climate change well before the deadline. Climate Change Minister Malik Amin Aslam detailed some pivotal measures taken by Pakistan in this regard.
On the forestry side, we had the Billion Tree project, which was started in 2014 in the KP province, and then we achieved that target in 2018. And then we initiated another program called the 10 Billion Tree project, which is all over Pakistan, and it is underway right now. On the energy side, we've done a number of things since we came in. Firstly, we introduced Pakistan's first electric vehicle policy. We also announced the fuel shift from Euro 2 to Euro 5. Similarly, on clean energy, we have a target of meeting, by 2025, 60% of our production should be clean energy, which includes big dams and hydro, wind, and solar.
The Prime Minister's advisor Malik Amin Aslam said Pakistan has also begun converting the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor into the China-Pakistan Green Economic Corridor to boost climate change controlling measures.
We have also started making the CPEC into a green CPEC, and in that context, we shelved 2,600 megawatts of imported coal projects that were signed and included in the CPEC. We have stopped that, and we have shifted to 3,700 megawatts of hydro projects, which have been inaugurated by the Prime Minister.
The UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Goal calls for an urgent action to improve health and education while tackling climate change and preserving the environment. According to the experts, Pakistan has faced around 150 freak weather incidents as a result of climate change in past 20 years. But the efforts to mitigate these hitches have started yielding results in the shortest span of time as of 5 years, which is being lauded globally. Reporting for Indus News, Sumaira Khan, Islamabad.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has vowed to keep interest rates pinned near zero until a rise in inflation. In a news conference, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said it will maintain the rates until the economy exceeds the 2% inflation target. Powell said the pledge will support the economic activity and return the inflation to its targeted goal faster. He said the bank provided stability and relief in the first phase of the pandemic crisis, and now it was ready to support the expansion. Powell said the fiscal recovery is ongoing, but the pace is expected to slow, requiring continuous support from central bank and the further government spending.
The path forward will also depend on the policy actions taken across all parts of the government to provide relief and to support the recovery for as long as needed. The Federal Reserve's response to this crisis has been guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people, along with our responsibilities to promote the stability of the financial system. We remain committed to using our full range of tools to support the economy in this challenging time.
The World Bank says global economic recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic may take as much as 5 years. In a virtual conference, the bank's chief economist, Carmen Reinhardt, said the recession will last longer in some countries than in others. The economist said there will be a quick rebound as the old restrictions and lockdowns are lifted, but full recovery will take years. Reinhardt said the recession will exacerbate inequalities as the poorest will be harder hit by the crisis in rich countries. She said for the first time in 20 years, global poverty rates will rise following the crisis. Another weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.